Well, hello. This is Robert Phoenix broadcasting to you live on Sunday night here in Austin, Texas for the Sunday night live stream. We don't have anybody in the old chat room yet. There's one person, but slowly but surely you will assemble, hopefully, as we get tonight's show together. And it won't be a terribly long show tonight. Let me just get this going here, get the right setup. All right, so the person who was there left. Okay. Probably what I'll do is we got one thumbs up. Okay. How is everybody? We're just about ready to hold on a second here. Let me just get my frame set up. Okay. It's got to look right. Hey, what's happening out there? We are just about over Capricorn. Let's check out the chart of the moment here. Let's see what we have going on. See what's taking place. So we have, let's see, Sun at 2. So this is Monday, the 22nd. There's Eileen. Hi, Eileen. How's it going? Eileen. Let me go back into the, see if I can just go back to my browser from last week. So we can get the chart of the moment as it is right now. In Austin, Texas. Yep, that's right. Sun in Capricorn. 26 degrees. Let's see what we got here. Hold on a second. Hold on. That's from last week. We'll get there. We will get up to speed. Sun at 2 degrees Aquarius. There we go. 2 degrees Aquarius. And how did that differ from the chart of the moment here? Let's look at it. This is from, let's just check this out. The difference between the chart of the moment and my chart of the moment, which is based on my chart from, there we go, from France. Okay. It's a little more Sag rising right now here in Austin, Texas. Okay, that's Verdun. And let's see. And what do we have here based on chart of the moment? Okay. Yep. So this is from Austin. So we have let's see, Sun Sag. Let's see, rising sign Sag, chart of the moment. Make sure I have everything connected. There we go. Give me one sec, peeps. Let me just go in here. Accuracy is key when it comes to astrology. It is vital. Yeah, here we go. Vital. I'm going to cast the chart of the moment again. Because when it comes to our reputations, accuracy can sometimes be paramount. Just ask Jordan Peterson. We're going to talk about Jordan Peterson tonight a little bit on tonight's show. Give me one sec here. It's coming. It is coming. We're going to go home now. And the chat is a moment one more time. And once we get this going, we'll jump into it. Okay, this is much better. This is what I like. All right. Okay, so there we go. What's happening? I have a few things lined up for you tonight. Of course, we're going to look at the chart of the moment and see what's happening out there, in there. For all of us, we are now officially in the sign of Aquarius, 2 degrees Aquarius. Today was Nick Foles' birthday. Nick Foles is the quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles, and good things happen on your solar return, don't they? Because Nick Foles was at the peak of his powers and defeated the Minnesota Vikings in the Frigidaire of the stadium in Philadelphia, at their stadium where the Eagles play. And the Eagles soared today, defeating the Minnesota Vikings handily and Nick Foles, one of two quarterbacks who were Aquarians, facing off against one another in one game. Of course, the other Aquarian was Case Keenum. Now, had Case Keenum won this game, the Super Bowl would have been 2 weeks out, and the sun would have been very close to Case Keenum's sun in Aquarius. He's born on the 17th of February, so he's right at the edge, like the last days of Aquarius. So even though the sun would not have been exactly conjunct, it would have been conjunct enough so that he would have been gaining momentum. Unfortunately for Case Keenum, he did not win. And Nick Foles, on his birthday, on his solar return, carried the day, and he will face off against Tom Brady. How about that? Leo Tom Brady against Aquarian Nick Foles 2 weeks from now in the Super Bowl. Tom Brady has an incredible astrological chart, which I've actually decoded a couple of times. And what's fascinating about Tom Brady is that he wants to play until he's 50 years old. Now, Tom Brady has a Sun-Saturn conjunction in his chart. So he's really into longevity, and he's gotten into this austerity program. He's totally committed to a plant-based diet, no sugar, no alcohol, no peppers, no nightshades. That means tomatoes. He eats avocado ice cream, stays fully hydrated. This is a really indicative of a Sun-Saturn conjunction. Now, not all Sun-Saturn people will do this, by the way, but they're much more inclined to be able to deny themselves some form of pleasure, which Leos enjoy pleasure. Leos enjoy, feeling good, and they don't mind a bit of a party, especially if they're the life of the party. Leos always love that. But with that Sun-Saturn conjunction, Brady has the capacity to defer instant gratification. So he goes to bed at 8 o'clock now every night, and he's up early in the morning. He's doing his strength training through resistance band training and all that stuff. Well, he pulled off another one today, a late win against the pesky Jaguars of Jacksonville. So we'll have an Aquarian sun versus a Leo sun. That's going to be very interesting. Now, you would think that with the sun in the opposite sign of Brady's sun, or close to thereabouts, that it would somehow be, how do I say this? Not really all that positive for Tom Brady. But Brady has bucked astrological trends, and he's overcome the opposition, literally and figuratively, because the opposition is the sun sign in Aquarius, which is when the Super Bowl takes place, also known as the Superb Owl. The Super Bowl as the Superb Owl. So we're going to have an Aquarian versus a Leo in the Super Bowl, amongst other players, but the quarterback position is pretty important. And Nick Foles, just like his counterpart, Case Keenum today, and also Carson Wentz, who is a Capricorn and does play for the Philadelphia Eagles, we're straight out of the gate. All glory goes to God. That's what he said. All glory goes to God. And I thought, hey, great. Now we have 2 weekends in a row where there's this praise being sung. Now, again, I'm not a born-again Christian, but I like the fact that they're getting to say this on national TV, because the Christians have had a really rough time. And I'm not talking about the dispensationalist Zionist Christian or Christian Zionist. And I'm talking about just sort of the faith in general and how it's been absolutely, utterly demonized. Apparently, when you do a search on Google for Jesus, what comes up in the first part of those search results is the fact that Google is disseminating essentially, it's not false information, but it's the top hits are, is Jesus real? Was Jesus a myth? Is Jesus fake? Is Jesus fake news? I mean, this is what comes up for Google. So you may want to play with it. I mean, for different people, the search results are going to be different, but I would say by and large that they're kind of loading this as, hey, you may want to think twice about this Jesus character. Anyway, I'm getting off on a bit of a Jesus role early in the show tonight. But again, it was just interesting. I find it interesting that the guys that keep on winning get to keep talking about Jesus. Well, that's not going to happen next week if Tom Brady wins, because Brady is not that kind of guy. But Nick Foles is. We'll see what happens after that. So the chart of the moment, we have 29 degrees, Virgo rising. Hey, so my sun is sitting right on the ascendant right now as I'm talking to you from Austin, Texas, through internet land. Hey, I don't have the ability to do charts tonight. I'm sorry. I apologize. I still have to figure out how this new system works with YouTube. And I've just been busy doing some other stuff this past weekend. Anyway, so the sun is at 29 degrees Virgo. So we're going to look at where the planets are really specifically this week. Now, the moon is in Pisces, and it's at 26 Pisces or 28 Pisces. So we're getting ready to move from the moon in Pisces to the moon in Aries. It's going to be a hot moon in Aries starting on Monday. So the moon over the course of the next 48 hours is going to go into square with Mercury. So we'll have a moon Mercury square, and that's not always that great for being able to communicate. And then we're going to have, let's see what else. The moon is in trine with Mars right now in Scorpio. So Mars is getting to those final degrees of Scorpio, finally moving slowly, grinding the gears through Scorpio and getting ready to hit Sagittarius pretty quickly here. That's going to be interesting, Mars and Sagittarius. And we're going to have that until, January, February, almost March, when it goes into Capricorn, and then it's into Capricorn and Aquarius for most of the year. So Mars and Sagittarius coming soon. But the final degrees of Mars and Scorpio, we're at that 27th degree, the 28th degree, and that can be kind of an intense degree, to be quite honest with you. Anytime we get into 27 and 28, and I've talked about this before, this is when the energy of the planet begins to kind of freak out and go all over the place. That's the nature of it, right? So when we get to those degrees, especially in Mars with Scorpio, there's some energy that can be, how do I say this, expressed as wild abandonment. Let's put it that way, with Mars and Scorpio. And then it's, like I said, it's going to the Sagittarius, and it's all about truth, expression, honesty, authenticity, and not holding back. Mars and Sagittarius does not hold back. So you got to figure out where Mars is in your chart as it begins to move into Sagittarius roughly midweek. So we're having a shift, the shift date in the change in the shift. New shift is coming on with Mars in Sagittarius. Jupiter is there still in Scorpio. It's going to get up to 23 degrees, and it will go retrograde. Interesting Venus-Sun conjunction. Venus is moving just beyond the Sun, and Venus in Aquarius is detached. It is universal. It is about friendship. It's about brotherhood. It's about agape. But it is detached. And so we have this detached energy. And we always have this time of year, right? Sun-Venus conjunction. In a lot of ways, it allows us to relate in a way that is less personal. And if there are emotionally charged situations in your life, less personal sometimes can actually be quite good, as they give a person the ability to step back and have some perspective. So again, wherever Aquarius is showing up in your chart. That's where the sun is going to be headed through for the next 30 days. Actually, Aquarius is pretty short. So what does it goes from January 20, I guess it was the 20, almost 19th this year, because it's at 2 degrees. So today is the 21st, yesterday, the 20th. And then what do we have? So it would have been 1 degree. So right around late in the 19th, early in the 20th, the sun went into Aquarius, and it'll be there until what, February 18th, February 19th, right around there. I think it's 19th this year. So yeah, almost 30 days out. Aquarius has a pretty short run because it's a short month. February, as we all know, the shortest month out of the year. So just keep an eye on where the sun is transiting through your chart. For me, it's going through my 3rd house, which is going to be writing, communication, siblings. I have none, but I have extended family. There's a lot of people out there in the internets that I connect with, and I consider you my extended family. What else do we have? Saturn is at 3 degrees Capricorn, and we're going to talk about Saturn and Capricorn tonight in a couple of charts that I've got pulled up, although you're not going to be able to see them. Tomorrow, one of the people I'm going to talk about tonight, in fact, I'm probably just going to talk about one chart in general. Tomorrow is the birthday of Michael Hutchence, who was the lead singer of INXS and who died on the 22nd of November back in 1997. We're going to look at Michael Hutchence's chart and a few other charts associated with the death of Michael Hutchence in order to perhaps understand and get some insight into what really happened behind his death, which is quite mysterious. And I ran across an article that cast not only an interesting light on the death of Michael Hutchence, but also promoted a certain amount of complexity around this, and it will relate to perhaps another figure or series of deaths that I'm going to talk about and reference. So let's just go back to Mercury real quick here. I didn't give Mercury's due. It's at 15 Capricorn. So again, we're dealing with these planets. Well, once the moon goes into Aries, it'll be very personal, correct? Because Aries is the first sign. Right now, it's at the 28th degree of Pisces, and it's totally transpersonal. So look at that. This is interesting. This is really cool. So since I've been online, and I punched up the chart of the moment, and we started off at 29 Virgo, and now between the time that I started the broadcast and talking about the chart of the moment, it actually went into 1 degree Libra. So that's actually a live organic chart. So if you play with that on astro.com and go to the chart of the moment, it will actually go through the transits as we speak. And it's, if you want to take some time over the course of the day, just kind of watch it, it'll be interesting to see how the ascendant evolves and how fast it moves and all that stuff. That's a very Mercury and Capricorn kind of topic. But if you look at, let's just go to the first 1, 2, 3, 4, the first 4 planets, they're all transpersonal. Again, with the moon at 28 degrees, tomorrow goes into Aries, and at which point it will be very personal. Aries being the first sign, the first house represents the head. So moon in Aries could represent a headstrong energy. But for now, it's transpersonal. And even Mars, Mars in Scorpio, transpersonal. And it goes into Sagittarius. What does transpersonal mean? Well, the outer signs and the outer planets tend to be what we call transpersonal. So roughly from Jupiter to Neptune are the transpersonal planets. Saturn are called the mid-transpersonals, by the way, because they, we talked about this before. They sit between the outer planets and the inner planets. Saturn is really, really edging towards being a transpersonal planet. So we have the transpersonal planets and we have the transpersonal signs, roughly from Scorpio to Pisces. So as we go through the roster of planets where they are right now, it's all transpersonal until we get to Uranus, which is in Aries. So this is an interesting dichotomy, Uranus and Aries, in a lot of ways, because Uranus is a transpersonal planet. It represents change and revolution. It represents novelty. It represents technology. We've talked about Uranus quite a bit. Now look at that. The moon just went to 2 degrees, 2 degrees Libra from when we started to now. So it refreshes. The chart of the moment refreshes. That's great. So Uranus is an energy that is cultural in many ways. And Aries, of course, is not cultural and is certainly not transpersonal. Aries is the individual. And what we've seen during Uranus and Aries is, especially over the course of the last couple of years, is the thrust of these individual energies, or these energies that are expressed radically through individuals that represent groups which are Uranian, because all groups are Uranian or Aquarian. It doesn't really matter what the group is. It could be a group that raises daffodils, or it could be a group that, burns police stations down. Still a group. So Uranus/Aquarius represents groups, and then of course Aries is the individual. So what we have here is we have this interesting energy that is transforming, radicalizing the identity of the individual. And we've seen this, most recently in the election, and with Trump and Hillary Clinton, the last presidential election. And what we saw is a group of people, aka the deplorables, have a revolutionary or radical break with supposedly the rest of the country. It's very interesting when we get into this Uranus and Aries dynamic, because when we look at Hillary Clinton, what was the Clinton campaign practicing? They were practicing identity politics. Identity politics. So they were focusing on very specific people, or very specific, I wouldn't even say groups of people, because, they utilize groups, which is Uranus. They utilize groups, and we're trying to engage certain groups in a way where they would feel as though they could either vote for Hillary or vote for the other, which was being marginalized and demonized. This is what identity politics does. So they were taking a radical approach, they being the Clinton campaign, a radical approach towards looking at specific types of individuals inside of a group. So, for instance, they were looking at people like, conservatives. They were looking at people like conservative males. They were looking at people like white conservative males. And then from that point forward, they were drilling down and doing everything in their power to go after those groups, those various groups. So it'd be conservatives, it would be white conservatives, and then white conservative males. This was their strategy. So they were radicalizing the notion that they could go after targeted individuals. In a lot of ways, group identity or identity politics is akin to gang stalking. It really is, because what Hillary Clinton did is she empowered other groups to go after the groups that she was targeting. So she was creating, in essence, this morphing of the group, which almost becomes like a gang stalk, really. It's close to being a gang stalk. So whether it's Antifa or Black Lives Matter or any number of these groups, they were going after the individuals, the targeted individuals, inside of the rubric of identity politics. And ultimately, it was the splitting of the two groups, or it was a splitting of the nation, which would force the issue for the identity politics to be resolved at some point. And the resolver of those identity politics, of course, would be Hillary once she got into office. Because once she got into office, she would then be able to use legislation and whatever it was she had at her disposal to represent her groups who had supported her, and thus begin to marginalize those groups they had targeted. She was the reconciliation point. If you look at Hillary's chart, you'll see, now there are a couple versions of Hillary's chart, by the way. There's not one specific version of Hillary's chart, but if you look at her chart, one that's used the most has her at that early Sagittarius rising with her sun in the 12th house, which makes perfect sense to me because she's hidden, she's cloaked. But she also has, one of the things I'll say about Hillary Clinton is that she actually has a pretty good sense of humor. I think she's actually quite funny, but it depends on which version of Hillary you're running across. I think there are some Hillarys that have not such a good sense of humor. Anyway, if you look across the chart, what you will see in her 8th house, or on the cusp of the 8th house, is Gemini. And she was born during a time when Uranus was in Gemini. So this was a group that was inside of a subset that was Pluto and Leo. So when we look at Pluto and Leo, the older baby boomers have Uranus and Gemini. The younger baby boomers have Uranus and Cancer. Just like with the millennials, we see with the millennials, they have Pluto in Scorpio. And then just behind them, you'll see millennials that'll have, well, they won't be really millennial, but the kind of the late, it's about right around 1996, 95, 95, 96, that kind of tail end of the millennials. You have, of course, the Pluto and Sag kids. And they kind of fit in a little bit. Those first, I would say probably 96, 97, 98, they're kind of in that millennial zone. And once you get into 99, that's when things start to change because the transpersonals, Uranus and Neptune, begin to change. So this is kind of the example I'm talking about. Okay. So when you look at the early Pluto and Sag kids, they have Uranus in Aquarius in its own sign. I think it's like the first 3 years of 96, 97, 98, right around that. And then Uranus goes into Pisces. So it's just like when we looked at the baby boomers, they have Uranus in Gemini and then Uranus in Cancer. And then towards the end, there's, so which is, because it's really fascinating, Uranus goes through 3 changes with Hillary Clinton or the baby boomers. And it goes Uranus, Gemini, Uranus, Cancer, and then Uranus, Leo, which is the very tail end of the baby boomers. So it goes through 3 Uranian changes, roughly 7 years per Uranus, about almost 21 years for the baby boomers. That's a long transit. And then Pluto, of course, goes into Virgo, but some of the Pluto and Virgo people are actually considered baby boomers, like I think 1958, 1959, to 57, 58, 59. That's when Pluto starts to go into Virgo, and even 60. Then that's kind of the tail end of the baby boomers. Even though, generally speaking, from like roughly 1958 to about 1963, there's another little subset called Generation Zero or Generation Jones, because they're not quite boomers, they're not quite Gen Xers. It's an interesting generation. Of course, yours truly is a part of that. Then we really get into Gen X starting around 1964, 1965. Generally, that's how I see it. But anyway, let's go back to Hillary Clinton. Her Uranus is in Gemini, and it's in her 8th house. So Trump has Uranus in Gemini as well. They both have it. But with Trump, we know that his Uranus is in his 10th house, conjunct his sun. So it's going to be, radical, and it's going to be disruptive, and it's going to be revolutionary. That's the nature of what Trump is and does and has been doing since he's gotten into office. You know, and he's had that Saturn-Sun opposition and Saturn-Uranus opposition going on. That's been an intense time. Anytime you get a Saturn-Sun opposition, your identity is challenged in a huge way. He's had Saturn on his moon, and the moon represents the home. And he's got that moon in Sag in the 4th house. And that is really, in a lot of ways, kind of the bedrock of MAGA. Moon in the 4th house is very sentimental. Doesn't matter what sign it's in, it's sentimental. Works backwards, right? That's the nature of it. That's the nature of the moon. So he's got that moon in the 4th house, but it's a Sagittarius, and it's very proud in Sagittarius from an ideological perspective. So he's had Saturn on his moon, which is indicative. He's had hard times at home. He's had hard times living in the White House. He's had hard times living in Trump Tower. He's probably had a hard time with Melania. And then he's had this Saturn-Sun opposition, which is challenging his identity. Saturn, remember now, Saturn represents hierarchy. Saturn represents the bureaucracy. It does represent the government too, right? Corporations and the government. So he's had Saturn opposite his Uranus and Saturn opposite his Sun. So what's a guy supposed to do? Get on Twitter at 2 a.m. and let some steam off, right? Isn't that what he does? Anyway, so with Hillary, though, that Uranus is in the 8th house. That's Scorpio's house. That's a hidden house. That's a house where the shadows are. That's a house where things are going on in a much kind of darker way, right? It's a darker place. Now, remember, Uranus is a planet that's transpersonal. So the overall effect with the outer planets, especially in the 8th house, would tend to be more psychological. They would tend to be energies that would come from the inside out. But there's also a compulsion. There is a compulsion with the 8th house. Pluto is a sign, it's a planet, and Scorpio is a sign that can be connected to compulsivity and obsessiveness, right? Compulsion and obsession. That's the nature of Pluto. That is the nature of the 8th house. That is the nature of Scorpio. You know, it's like that story of the scorpion and the frog, and how the frog wants to cross the river. I said the scorpion wants to cross the river, and he says, if I cross the river, I'll drown. But if I get on your back, you'll be able to take me across because you're a good swimmer. And the frog looks at him and says, well, if you're on my back, you'll sting me. And he said, well, you know, if I sting you, then you'll die of poison and I'll drown. So the frog said, well, you got a point there. I don't know what was in it for the frog, though. I just don't know what was in it for the frog. So let's say he gets him across the river, and the Scorpio doesn't do what he does in the middle of the river. What would be in it for the frog? Like good karma points for the frog, a couple less warts. He should have struck a better deal with the Scorpio. He really should have, but he didn't. That's Trump talking, right? Have you heard this? Let me speak to my Trump. I can't even do Trump. Maybe something along the lines of, have you heard the story about the scorpion and the frog? You know, there was a frog, and he was a great frog. A really, 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 really great frog. Just the awesomest frog there could be. And then there was a Scorpio. And the Scorpio wanted to ride that frog's back all the way across the river. You know where I'm going with this. You know where I'm going with this. You people are smart. You're not dumb. You're not dumb. Anyway, so what happens is, as the frog is going across the river, all of a sudden feels the spike of the scorpion stinger pierce its watertight skin. And then all of a sudden the toxins seep in, the poison seep in. And he turns around and he looks at the scorpion and says, why'd you do it? Why did you do it? And the Scorpio said, I couldn't help myself. It's my nature. So there's something about obsessiveness and possessiveness, or at least not even possessiveness. There's something about compulsion in that story that really speaks to Scorpio in a lot of ways. Okay, at least I think it does. So with that Uranus in Gemini in her 12th house, there is that sense of Uranian compulsion. And then Gemini, of course, is going to split things in two. It's going to divide and conquer, divide and conquer, divide and conquer. And Uranus also rules the media. So what did Hillary have when she had Saturn going through her chart, opposing her Uranus? It was pulling these things out of her 8th house. Saturn was literally going through her 2nd house. And, you know, she had to deal with things like values. And again, this is, you know, kind of later degree Sagittarius, because her 1st house is mostly Sag. Anyway, she had this is what was happening with Hillary. And this Saturnian energy was pulling on her natal Uranus. I think it ingresses into her chart. Hillary's chart up here. So I'm making sure. What do we got? I got to work on my chart. The really, really, really good frog. Let me tell you, this was a great frog. It wasn't like any other frog. All right, here we go. Okay, let me just look this up. Again, we have to deal not in assumption and not in generalization, but the exactitude of truth. Here we go. Pulling this up here. I've got a song in my head and I can't get it out. I'm not going to sing it to you because I'm not going to pass it on to you. Okay, it's not happening. It's just not happening. I'm not going to infect you with this song, even though it would get out of my head because I've heard it about 10 times. Yeah, okay, here we go. Punchbowl Hill's chart up here. So it's her Uranus is at the final degrees of Gemini, and that's at 25. So Saturn would have been going through Saturn during the election. Saturn was at around 1920, right around there. I think got up around 20. So it wasn't quite in opposition to her Uranus, but it was close. Let's just go back. Let's go back into time. Again, we're just trying to be as accurate as possible here so I can give you the best representation. We're going to go into the ephemeris, and I'm going to go back to 2016. And I'm going to find out where Saturn was and where it was in opposition or natal Uranus, give or take about 4 or 5 degrees. Okay, that's going to be the formula. This is how I look stuff up. Okay, so I'll go into the ephemeris, and I'm going to see roughly where Saturn is in opposition, or was in opposition to Uranus. So I'm going to go back into 2016, 21st century. 21st century. Okay, so 2016. And let's go to, how about election night? Remember election night? What a scene that was on 11/9. All right, here we go. Okay. So 11/9. All right. Saturn was at 14 degrees. Okay. So pretty early Saturn. Now Saturn did get up to 15, 16. It was up as high as 16 degrees. So the opposition to Uranus would take place later. So that would be December, January. So right around, well, it's going to be right around the inauguration. Right here. Let me just look at this. Yeah, so she would have had February. Not well, the inauguration was January 20th. But in February, Saturn would have been opposed her natal Uranus. So let's go back to her chart real quick here as I cruise around without any graphics. So yeah, Uranus in her chart is at 25 degrees. So when Saturn was at 10 or 15 rather, it would have been in a wide opposition. Definitely a wide opposition. Now, she has her moon at 22 degrees, which is square Uranus. And she has crazy emotions. Look, I know there are people out there with Uranus moon squares. Let's put it this way. You have creative emotions with the Uranus moon square. You're different. But there is a bit of eccentricity and at times, outright craziness with a moon Uranus square. It's just the way it is. You got to give yourself a lot of latitude. If you have a moon Uranus square in your chart, I suggest you be an artist because it would be very helpful. So Saturn was actually in square with her moon a bit more. And that's an interesting thing to think about because the moon is women. It's the feminine energy inside the chart. So did Saturn square moon make her less appealing to women in the run up to the election? As possible. She might have alienated women with a Saturn moon square. But also, that would have been a time where Hillary probably would have been going through some form of depression as well. Some form of depression. Saturn moon squares are depressive inside the chart. But I think her relationship with women got challenged during that time. And I think that there were women that actually left Hillary. It's funny that, so I want to segue, not yet though. Not yet, but there's something here that I've got to make a connection with. Recently, I talked about and posted on Facebook an interview with Jordan Peterson. Now, I did not know the name of the woman who was interviewing him, but apparently her name is Kathy Lawrence. And Kathy Lawrence is a Cancer, and she was going toe-to-toe with a Gemini. And Cancers, of course, have great emotional power when they tap into it. And I believe, she's born on July 14th, which means that Pluto is in opposition to her sun. Not quite, but it's getting close. It's getting close. So 14, that's 14 degrees. And then from the 1st to the 23rd, what is that? That's roughly 8 degrees. So about 22 degrees up. Well, yeah, 22 degrees. So Pluto's in opposition to her sun, which is a very challenging aspect. It forces the individual to go through some kind of transformation from outside forces. That's how oppositions work, correct? It's the outside force. It's the opposing force. So this process and this thing that she went through with Jordan Peterson, is it's not the end of something for her. It's actually the beginning of something. Now, the other thing that's going on with this is she's gotten some nasty tweets and emails and all kinds of other foul and scurrilous things to say, calling her an old CU space T, you know what I'm saying? And that she was disgusting and that she got her ass kicked and all these things. Now, the Pluto opposition could make her tougher in some ways. It could steel her against these forces that want to transform her. And I'm not saying that the random creeps that are insulting her are the transformational forces. I would actually say that Jordan Peterson is a transformational force. So what I'm trying to connect here is that if you go back to my Facebook page where I posted the really interesting, it wasn't even an interview, it was more like an interrogation from Kathy Lawrence to Jordan Peterson. Peterson had a lot of really supportive people from, my page. And they were women. A lot of them were women, and they were very supportive of Jordan Peterson. And they were not entirely supportive of Kathy Lawrence, who interrupted him. She was almost like a bully. She came across like a borderline bully. And I think the same kind of empathy towards men was taking place for women during that Saturn moon square with Hillary during the election. And apparently even Bill Clinton told her to lighten up on the men. And she didn't do it. So I think what happened, and in as much as we'd like to portray our world as being this maelstrom where the relationships between men and women are being torn asunder through this hashtag Me Too. I also feel like we underestimate the fact that sometimes we can be our, biggest cheerleaders for the other sex. I think we've lost sight with that. And I think a lot of that still is true. And I think this is what happened during the Clinton campaign. Is that women who saw that they were insulting men who were their husbands and their brothers and their fathers and people who fought in wars and all this stuff, I think they got turned off. And I think Hillary really counted on the fact that she's got a very strong representation with other women. You look at her natal moon, it's in trine with her Venus, it's in trine with her Mercury, it's in trine with her ascendant. So she channels that moon energy, that feminine energy, right through that Scorpio rising. Didn't happen. And of course, there was Uranus in play as well during that time. So then ultimately the Saturn opposition. Anyway, I just thought we'd go for a little dissertation there on Hillary Clinton and the election. And that Saturn squared her moon. That's interesting. I hadn't really dove into that, but I think that there are at the very least some fundamental astrological metrics that we can plug into with it. She has Black Moon Lilith at 29 Capricorn. That's going to be interesting. She's going to have Pluto on her Black Moon Lilith and Saturn on her Black Moon Lilith. Saturn probably before Pluto. In fact, we know it would be before Pluto. It'll be an interesting time for Hillary. People keep asking me, well, why? How come she keeps skating free? How come she keeps skating free? Why? Well, probably because she either has a ton of information on other people. I mean, think of it. If she goes down, who's she going to take with her? The whole kit and caboodle, because they're all connected through the Clinton Foundation, Bill Clinton, and yada, yada, yada. Speaking of the Clintons, there's going to be a new movie coming out. I think it's a TV series on Waco. And Michael Shannon is in it. He's always a good actor. I like Michael Shannon. Anyway, it's about Waco. So we're recasting Waco now. Very interesting time for that. Okay, so let me just check in. Let's see who's in the chat room. Is there anybody in the chat room? What do we got here? Oh, we got 30 people. All right. We got Lana there. There's Sally. Hey, Sally. There's Madeline. Her woman makes some cute hats for her demonstrations. Oh, yes. Sorry, cute. I say cut hats is now cute hats. There's Media Monarchy. Hey, Media Monarchy. What's going on? And I'm just going to give you a heads up on the chat. So Lana is in the chat room tonight, and I'm sure she doesn't mind me talking about this, but Lana is, and I'm going to talk to her this week, approach me with a crisis / dilemma of what's going on in her life with her son. So we're going to talk this week, and I'm going to find out more about it and see if we both agree to having her on my show to talk more about it. So you may see more of Lana over the course of the next week or so as it comes to my show. Okay, there she is. Look forward to it. All right, so where are we? 11:07. 07. Here's Madeline. Hi, Madeline. How are you doing tonight? Nice to see you. Yeah, I hope so too. Yeah, me too. So I wanted to get into that Jordan Peterson talk just a little bit more, because people ask me, well, how does, Jordan Peterson has Mercury retrograde in Gemini in his chart. And people ask me, well, I have Mercury retrograde in my chart. What do I do with it? How does it work? Well, I think Mercury retrograde people wind up doing retrofitting in their life, and they're good. They're good at going back and correcting things. They're really good at that. And Jordan Peterson is a master at it, because during that interview / debate, he would say, no, I did not say that. And he would have to continually go back into the conversation and reference what he said and then bring it forward. I don't think I've ever seen a more explicit exhibition of Mercury retrograde in a chart. It was absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Okay, so I'm not gonna spend a huge amount of time tonight online with the show, because I'm dealing with still that's cedar fever stuff. But I wanted to talk about Michael Hutchence. And Michael Hutchence was the lead singer of INXS. I'm sure many of you remember who he is and what he looked like. Extremely good-looking guy. Very, very smart, charismatic, great rock and roll band, took America by storm. And for all intents and purposes, one would think that he was quite rich. Think of all the hit records. Think of all the hit records that Michael Hutchence has had. Think of all the hit songs. Millions and millions of records. And not just the records that were sold, but placement of songs in advertisements and movies. We're talking publishing, mechanicals. These are income streams that go on for perpetuity, as long as the records and the songs are being purchased and played and listened to. Just remember that as we get into this. Now, Michael Hutchence was a 28-degree Capricorn rising with Sun on the ascendant and Mercury in Capricorn. So let's just take this for a little bit here. When we have Sun on the ascendant, what do we have? We have an individual that has Aries-like energy. People that have Sun on the ascendant have an unmistakable signature. They are a force to be reckoned with the Sun on the ascendant. And in the sign of Aquarius at 0 degrees, Michael Hutchence was rebellious. He was totally rebellious. But that sun also gives up. It's really interesting, because the Aquarian sun is a cool sun. It's a cool sun. And on the ascendant, it would give off heat. Any sun, I don't care what it is. Sun in Cancer, Sun in Virgo. I've seen some of the most intense people with Sun in Virgo on the ascendant. And these are people that are a force. So the sun on the ascendant is like a force of nature. Okay. And Mercury right behind the sun. So when we see that, the individual is experiential. The individual does not filter through the intellect. If Mercury's on the other side of the sun, if Mercury rose before the sun at the time that Michael Hutchence was born, he'd have Mercury in the first house before the sun. That would mean he'd be more mental. He'd be more mental, intellectual, and thinking. With Sun in front of Mercury, he's more experiential. And then the intellectual and the mental part kick in. Nonetheless, with Mercury on the ascendant, he's also a communicator. Okay. Now, there are elements to Michael Hutchence' chart that are a bit disturbing. He had Mars and Saturn both in the 12th house. Mars in the sign of Capricorn, and Saturn also in the sign of Capricorn. Had Michael Hutchence still be alive, he'd be going through a second Saturn return. Now, those are two of the most difficult planets to have in the 12th house. Mars is violence and hidden enemies in the 12th house. Of course, that's old school astrology, but it's still a worthy definition of Mars in the 12th. I've seen people with Mars in the 12th. I had Mars in the 12th through my father. My father had Mars in Scorpio. So his Mars is in my 12th house. I know exactly what that's like. It's not fun. It's not fun dealing with Mars in the 12th house, especially if you're the other person on the other side of that Mars 12th house experience. You know, people that have Mars in the 12th house can feel threatened at times, or people outside of that experience, outside of that person, can feel threatened by that person's Mars. It's a very intense and very powerful placement for Mars. It's disturbing in the 12th house. Now, if you're creative and you're an artist and you're working in an artistic medium like a recording studio, now Mars in the 8th house can be good. I mean, that recording studio is a 12th house kind of environment, right? People don't go there. It's creative. Sometimes it's dark. You know, what goes on in the studio? Crazy shit goes on in recording studios sometimes. So if you have the right context with Mars there, you can get a lot done. You can be a force in the studio. But outside of the studio, when you're living a day-to-day life, when you're going to the store, when you're picking up your laundry, when you're dealing with your family, all those things, Mars now becomes this disincarnate energy in the 12th house. You have to tend to Mars. You see, this is the nature of Mars in the chart. You have to tend to it. You have to make sure that you're exercising Mars in your life. When you don't exercise Mars in your life, what happens? Well, you can lose Mars, or you can be abused by Mars. Either way. So what will happen generally with somebody who has Mars in the 12th house is that people will perceive that Mars in a way as a threat, that they would feel something emanating off the other person that they needed to become engaged with and either act or react or go on the offensive or beyond the defensive with that Mars in the 12th house. And if you are not working with your Mars in the 12th house, if you're not dealing with it, guess what happens? It becomes this force that's generated, and if it's not dissipated, then other people sense it as some form of aggression. Okay? So he's got Mars there, and it's in Capricorn, which is it's pretty vital in Capricorn. But then there's Saturn, and that Saturn is at 11 degrees and Mars is at 5. It's a pretty close conjunction. Men that have Mars-Saturn conjunctions in their chart have very difficult times with their fathers. The father can be abusive or violent. And I don't know, Michael Hutchence might have had that. I don't know the full story about his family. I do know that before he died, the night before he died, he had dinner with his family. He had dinner with his mother and parents. Now, Hutchence supposedly hanged himself on the 22nd of November in 1997. Paula Yates, who was his girlfriend at the time and the mother of their child together, claimed that Michael Hutchence was into auto asphyxiation, meaning that both he and her would do things that were kinky, crazy, dangerous. Maybe Mars in the 12th house dangerous. Hutchence is Pluto in the 8th house. Well, that's Scorpio's house. He has rulership there with Pluto. So he was probably quite used to dark energy and intense. Again, let's go back to Pluto. Here it's in Virgo, but Pluto in the 8th house is like Pluto in Scorpio. And we're talking about that intense energy, that compulsive energy. Now, Pluto is actually pretty well aspected in his chart. He had Pluto moon sextile That's magnetism. And he had Moon, Neptune in the 10th house. That's like rock star quality with Moon, Neptune in the 10th house. People who just project onto you, right? All over the world. All over the world. And that Pluto Moon sextile is intense. It's magnetic. It's hypnotic. It's erotic. So he's channeling erotic energy through that moon up at the 10th in the top of the chart. And if you look at Hutchins, you look at the videos, the guy is channeling, a high degree of sexual energy. Then he's got that Pluto Mars trine in the chart as well, the Pluto Saturn trine in the chart. So there's a lot of intense, dynamic energy with Pluto. The challenge with Michael Hutchins' chart is that there's nothing below the horizon. Nothing. This guy did not have a personal life. There was no personal life here. It was all 10th house and fame and the moon and drugs and Neptune, true node in the 9th. He had connections to other countries. He's from Australia. Paula Yates from England, born in Wales. He had that Venus-Jupiter conjunction in the 11th house. That's groups. That's a band. And Venus-Jupiter expanded his relationship with the 11th house and groups. Unstable with Uranus in the 7th house for relationships. They're going to be short. Uranus in the 7th house give you interesting, creative, radical outside relationships, but they don't always last. Now, you can work with that a little bit. Perhaps you've got some planets in the second house. Maybe Venus is down in the second house, which would ground your relationships. Or let's say, for instance, you have maybe Sun in the 5th house, in which case you might be, really engaged in love and being loving and all those 5th house things. It doesn't matter what happens with Uranus. At that point, you've got a Sun-Uranus sextile. You can probably just roll with it, right? So Uranus in the 7th house it's not a death sentence for having relationships, but the relationships are unusual. You'd get involved with unusual people, unusual circumstances. And the love triangle, or it is a love triangle between Michael Hutchins, Bob Geldorf, and Paula Yates got very, very intense. And for all intents and purposes, was almost like a game of death in some ways. So we have the Sun square to Neptune in his chart, Sun square Moon in his chart. And Sun square Moon is generally speaking conflict with women. Now, he has some interesting aspects with that moon. We've already seen the Moon sextile to Saturn, Moon sextile to Mars. There's passion. There's also the potential for commitment in a lot of ways. When Michael Hutchins feels something, he's got a lot of intensity behind it. Pluto is an anchor. It's a fixed sign. Saturn is an anchor. Even though it's not a fixed sign, you get a Saturn Moon sextile, and there's a sense of real commitment to the emotional state. Okay? But the Sun square to Neptune and the Sun square to the Moon, to me, indicate that there is confusion and obfuscation with identity and also the conflict between the masculine and the feminine inside the chart. But again, with Michael Hutchins' chart, there's nothing below the horizon. You can look up his chart. Just go online and look at it. There's nothing below. He does not exist. Everything is out there, and it's up in the world. He's trying to have a kid. Apparently, he's in love. Now, what does he know about his kid? What does he know about his kid? And why? Here's the part to me that I get, how do I say this? Concerned about? Not concerned. He was almost obsessive. So what happened was, with Michael Hutchins, he got into a major custody battle with Bob Geldof, and Paula Yates had kids together. 2 other kids. Peaches Geldorf, by the way, is dead. She's dead. Terrible. Why is she dead? Well, Bob Geldof, and I'm not going to get into any spurious character assassinations, but let's just say that there is a high degree of suspicion about his connections to certain groups. and certain groups who have done unsavory things to people or people who are much younger, let's put it that way. Anyway, if that's the case, and if Michael Hutchence knew about this, if Michael Hutchence was concerned, deeply concerned over the fact that the daughter he shared with Paula Yates might be in danger, then perhaps Michael Hutchence would display qualities that would have been manic or disturbed or ill at ease for the safety of a 16-month-old child. I'm just putting it out there. Now, Paula Yates also had an addiction, if I'm not mistaken, to both she and Hutchence were, I believe, very much into drugs. And she ultimately died of a heroin overdose. Again, we don't always know the extent of these things. Now, what's interesting is that fairly long after the fact, after the event of Hutchence' death on the 22nd of November in 1997, the police came out with a report and said that he'd been rummaging through a bin, that his fingers were singed and burned from letting cigarettes burn down to the nub of his fingers, and he was looking for drugs. And he was basically a man that was driven to desperation and then decided to kill himself. Well, his parents had seen him the night before. They'd gone out to dinner with him the night before, and apparently he was in a pretty decent state. What happened to Michael Hutchence from the time he saw his parents to the time he was found later that day on the 22nd at about 11:50 in the morning? What happened to him? Now, apparently he got to a very heated conversation with Bob Geldorf over the phone, extremely heated, about getting his daughter to come back during Christmas. This is on the 22nd of November. He wanted to see his daughter for Christmas, and maybe what he really wanted was to get his daughter out of the UK and away from Paula and Bob Geldorf. Now, it's really interesting. I've been kind of reading about this a little bit, and one of his bandmates said that he was actually trying to leave. He was trying to leave Paula Yates. And I thought, what is Paula? Paula Yates is a Taurus, and I believe she had Sun Neptune opposition and Sun Moon opposition with Michael Hutchence, if I'm not mistaken. It's very close. So again, we get into that Sun Neptune opposition, Sun Moon opposition. There's intense attraction with the Sun Moon opposition, but with that Sun Neptune opposition, it's like, again, here we've got the, in fact, it's probably not. Let me see, when's her birthday? I just had her up here. I think it's I think it's April 26th or something like that. So she's an early Taurus, which meant that there would have been a sun-sun square between her and Michael Hutchence. This is a bad relationship. Bad relationship. Now her son is in his fourth house, which is the house of home and the mother. So of course she'd show up there. But this is a bad relationship, and one that is has a lot of Neptunian influences. He's got the sun square. She's got the moon opposition to sun opposition to his Neptune. Neptune rules drugs, alcohol, all that stuff. Okay, so I'm just putting this in context. And he has this terrible fight with Bob Geldorf over time. And it wasn't a one-time thing. He and Geldorf had been going at it for a while around his daughter, his and Paula's daughter. And apparently what Paula wanted to do is bring the other girls to Australia. And Geldorf was not going to allow that to happen. This is a guy, remember, he's Mr. Live Aid. He's a knight. He's connected to the Queen. Who do you think has the power in this showdown between Geldorf and Michael Hutchence? It's not Michael Hutchence. So one of his bandmates had said that he wanted to get out of the relationship with Paula Yates. When Paula Yates found his body, she had to fly all the way from London to Australia. She finally got in and found his body. Apparently, she drank an entire bottle of vodka. She must have been just a mess. There's actually a YouTube video out there that shows Paula Yates and Michael Hutchence meeting for the first time. You can find it. And boy, can you tell that she is smitten with Michael Hutchence. You can find it out there. If I had like a multimedia show right now, I'd put it on. So the other thing that I found interesting, and I'm going to get into a few other sort of forensics here, but the other thing that I found interesting was the fact that his daughter recently turned 18, and I just saw this piece on her, and she has not received any inheritance at all from Michael Hutchence, none whatsoever. Apparently, he was worth $30 million at the time of his death and had a number of holdings, real estate holdings. It was all gone. It was all gone. So Michael Hutchence, shortly after he died, had roughly $500 in a savings account and $500 in a checking account. And this is what his daughter inherited. And her mother's dead. And she was ultimately raised by Bob Geldorf. How about that? I bet you Michael Hutchence is haunting that guy. Anyway, where did the money go? Where did that money go? And where has the money gone since then? Has it gone to the band? Because Michael Hutchence wrote a lot of those songs. Has it gone to the band? No. Has it gone to his parents? No. So somebody has been collecting on his royalties, not only collecting on them since his death. It's the record company, obviously, whoever the publisher is. The publisher may have his name on it, but because of some deal that might exist in a contract or a clause, that money's gone. So Randy Quaid talks about star whackers. And star whackers are people that actually, first of all, they will gaslight you. If you have a lot of money, if you're a musician or you're an artist, then what they want to do is they want to get your intellectual properties from you so that you no longer are in control of them. This is apparently what happened with Dave Chappelle and why Dave Chappelle left Comedy Central, because they were gaslighting him and he was afraid that he was going to get whacked. And this is what happened to Randy Quaid, who left the United States because he thought that these star whackers were after him. And I actually believe that this does take place. Now, to what degree it does take place, does it happen every day? I don't know, probably some degree of it does. But when you get whacked, who gets your royalties? So who's getting Michael Hutchence's royalties? It's an interesting question to ask. His daughter got none of it. Okay, so what I wanted to do is I wanted to say, well, what's going on here with what's happening at the time of death? And, so what I did is I created a synastry chart for Hutchence and the death in his chart. It's a very interesting chart. And I should put this up on the website. So if you look, what's really fascinating is the time of death should be around 10:04, right around then, give or take maybe 10 minutes or so, because there was a woman who he called in the middle of the night and told her to come by. And I think he called her at around 7 in the morning or 6 in the morning. And then she came by at around 9:50, and she didn't hear him. Is that right? So it might have been a little bit before. Even if it's a little bit before, it's still going to be interesting. So I have the time of death here at 10:04 a.m. I have to recheck it, but it's very close, because they I think they found his body at 10:40, right around then. Okay, so what's interesting about this chart is that the ascendant is almost exact Hutchence's ascendant. So Hutchence is 29 or 20. Is it 28? Capricorn, and the ascendant of the event itself was right around, or the death itself was right around 0 to 3 Capricorn. So they're lining up very, very close. And at that time, there was a Mars-Mars conjunction going on. So Mars was in Capricorn, and of course, Hutchinson's Mars is also in Capricorn. They were conjunct in the 12th house. So think about it. Remember, Mars in the 12th house, that is the aspect of hidden enemies and hidden aggression. Transiting Mars was conjuncting his natal Mars. Transiting Venus was conjuncting his Saturn. I don't even talk about Saturn in the 12th. That's alienation. And in Capricorn, what are we dealing with? We're dealing with things like the corporatocracy and bureaucracies and all that stuff. And Michael Hutchinson and I have Saturn at the same degree at Capricorn. So Venus was actually conjunct his natal Saturn, which meant, guess what? That this is behind the scenes. This is behind the scenes. I'm guessing that there were people at Michael Hutchinson's in his room at the hotel. That's Venus. That is the visitation. That at that time that there was something happening in that 12th house sphere. Of course, we could talk about relationship. He's going through relationship struggles. Yeah, all that stuff. But the 12th house is that which we do not see. So we have violence and we have relationship. We have people in that 12th house during that time. Neptune was conjunct his ascendant and Mercury, ascendant and conjuncting his natal Mercury. So again, what is the message? What is he trying to get out? And how is the rest of the world via Neptune actually hearing it? Okay. Now we have Uranus at that time in Aquarius, and that's on his sun. Remember, this is 1997. This is that 97 period I was talking about with Uranus and Aquarius. So it's a radical energy. And look what we have during that time. We have Uranus in conjunct to Pluto. So transiting Uranus is in conjunct Pluto in his 8th house. Again, the 8th house is what? Death and transformation. So there's a relationship between Uranus and Pluto here that we have to figure out, because obviously there is a suddenness that takes place with the Uranus Pluto in conjunct at this degree or these degrees. And what is it? Pluto is at 5 Virgo and Uranus is at 5 Aquarius. That's a perfect 150 degree in conjunct. Something quick, something dramatic, something radical changed Michael Hutchinson's life, changed his perception. Now, his sun is not quite in a, let's see, his Pluto's at 5. His sun's not quite in a perfect inconjunct. It's got to be about 2 to 3 degrees, 3 at the most. So his sun is 5 degrees away. It doesn't really qualify as an inconjunct, but that transiting Uranus does. Now, transiting Saturn in Aries, which is violence, right? I mean, Aries, Mars, violence, Saturn. That was in his, both transiting through the 3rd house at that time. And in his 3rd house, guess what we had going on, though, there? We had Saturn, which was in Aries at, what degree is that? 14 degrees, squaring off against his natal Saturn. So it is Saturn square going on with Saturn in his 12th house. So remember, Saturn represents, hierarchies, bureaucracies. It represents corporations, and then we have violence here with Saturn in Aries. But Saturn sits on Aries. It puts a it puts a cage around that Aries expression in a lot of ways, right? But in the chart, there's a square going on, and transiting Mars is at how many degrees? 9 degrees. 9 degrees. So we have a Saturn-Mars square. So there's a lot going on in that 12th house, and Mars is definitely a trigger. If we go to the midheaven, there's Libra at the midheaven. Of course, there's this Moon, Neptune, and Chiron on his Neptune. There's a lot happening. Well, not a lot. Not a lot happening at the top of his chart. But what's interesting is that the midheaven for Hutchence is 17 Libra, and the midheaven for the event itself is going to be 19 Libra. Now, Bob Geldorf is a Libra. I believe he was born October 5th, which puts his sun very close to Michael Hutchence's midheaven. And, you know, that's a position where if somebody is on your midheaven, like their sun is on your midheaven, they can do one of two things. They can be really helpful and introduce you to people and kind of piggyback on the golden rays of their abundance and their personal expression, or they can dominate you with sun on the midheaven. Just remember that. Just remember that. I think the big news here in this is that Uranus in conjunct to Pluto, sudden, quick. And then the activity that's going on, the Mars-Mars conjunction and the Venus-Saturn conjunction in the 12th house, and then the communication or communicating the event itself to people with that Neptune square to Mercury. It's an interesting sort of compendium of elements. And of course, the moon, transiting moon, which was in the sign of Leo, final degrees of Leo is at 29 Leo. And so that's almost conjunct his natal Pluto in the 8th house. Okay. So I got a few other things around this. And what I did is, here's his and Geldorf's chart, Bob Geldorf. Put this up here. Okay, so Hutchence has that, remember I said that midheaven in Libra? So Geldorf's Neptune was right on Hutchence's midheaven. Just quite deceptive in a lot of ways. And then his sun, Geldorf has Sun, Mercury, and Saturn all in Libra. And Geldorf's Saturn is at 6 Libra. So it squares Michael Hutchence's Mars, and it squares his Saturn. That's a cardinal square. That is not a great square. So these guys are in conflict with that square. Total conflict with that square. And if you look at Geldorf's Mars, he's got his Mars in the sign of Virgo. And that's at 4 degrees. And Michael Hutchence has Pluto, guess what? Okay, Bob Geldorf has Mars in Virgo at 4 degrees. Michael Hutchence has Pluto in Virgo at 5 degrees. So Bob Geldorf's Mars is conjunct Michael Hutchence's Pluto in the 5th house, in the 8th house. So at the time of the death, when Uranus was conjunct Michael Hutchence's sun, it was in an inconjunct, not only with Pluto, but also Bob Geldorf's Mars in the 8th house in Virgo. Michael Hutchence. This is very interesting. Very interesting. And then, of course, Bob Geldorf's Venus is, again, it's conjunct. His Venus is at 4. His Mars is at 4. 0 Virgo. And Venus is at 4 Virgo. So Venus is part of that inconjunct. Nonetheless, his Mars at 0 Virgo is conjunct Hutchence's Pluto at 5 Virgo. In the 8th house, the house of death, transformation, the house of Pluto, the underworld. And even Geldorf's Pluto is in Bob Geldorf's 8th house, and it's conjunct Bob Geldorf's Uranus. So over Uranus transiting conjunction on Hutchence's sun in conjunct Pluto, and then we have Geldorf's Venus and Mars in that 8th house, the house of death. Very interesting. Then we have a Pluto-Uranus conjunction going on with wow. There's a lot here. There is a lot in this chart. Hell of a lot. And Bob Geldorf has his moon in Sagittarius in the 12th house. And you know, square to Hutchinson's Pluto. This is interesting. So I find it interesting. And if I were to look at this from a perspective of astrological forensics, I would have to say, and let's just say that there was a death here. Okay? And I didn't know who the two people were. I didn't know if it was Bob Geldof or Michael Hutchins. I say these planets on the outer ring, this Venus, Mars conjunction with Pluto, I say that this person has something to do with this, just based on the forensics of the chart. Okay. Now, he may not have gone there. He may not have, flown to, teleported from London to Australia. Something happened here. Something happened. I think there is a deeper level of involvement. That's all I'm going to say. But I did manage to do what I call a 4-way midpoint composite. So what I did is I entered in the the time for Hutchinson's death, created a chart around it, the chart for Bob Geldof, the chart of Michael Hutchins, and the chart of Paula Yates, and I put them all together to see what it would look like. It's very interesting. The ascendant of this chart, this midpoint composite between 4 entities, 1 an event and 3 people, created a Capricorn rising. And it had Mercury, Saturn, Sun, Chiron, and Jupiter all in Capricorn, all in the first house, which to me would be indicative of these Capricornian forces that were at play. So again, it wouldn't just be somebody like Bob Geldof, but there would be this Capricornian kind of entity. And whether it was the entity of the record corporation, or the publishing company, or some form of the government vis-a-vis the Queen, or some extension, there's a heavy-duty emphasis of Capricorn here on this event. This would be like the thumbprint of the event between all 4 of them in the midpoint composite. And then with Mars is in a very interesting place. The midheaven is at 21 degrees, Libra. It's a relationship, right? So you're dealing with relationship issues, custody issues, balance, litigation. There's Mars right at the top. Mars at 20 degrees Libra. It's the highest planet in the chart. Violence, aggression, and squaring off against some of those planets, particularly Chiron, which is at 15 Capricorn, and Jupiter, which is not a terrible square. But Venus is also squaring 13 Libra. So we have a Venus-Mars conjunction relationship, right? Masculine and feminine. And then the moon is at 28 Libra, and that's also in square. That's in square with Jupiter. It's the Venus-Sun square, which is relationships, agreements, Libra, and the Sun in this unforgiving place with the Saturn-Sun conjunction. That's a heavy, heavy force in the first house. And of course, the true node here is in Scorpio. So if we look at that true node, this is what's happening here. It has to do with death and transformation. True node in Scorpio in the 10th house. Now, Sally, who hangs out in the chat room, she's from Australia. I wonder what she has to say about all of this. Let me see if she's there. Yeah, Carradine came after that. Carradine came after Michael Hutchins. Let's see. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, so Sally, I mean, you were around during that time, just here in the chat room. Do you have any comments about Michael Hutchins and the mystery of his death, which I think there is plenty in these charts to look at and understand that we don't have the full picture, especially since he has absolutely no money left. Any thoughts on that? Let's see. Unless you have anything to say. Hey, there's Daniel. What's going on, Daniel? And there's Jerry. Hey, if you haven't found Nox Mente on YouTube, Jerry Cthulhu in the chat room does these really, really cool like dream voyages or dream journeys with people. And Let me see what she says. Is buffering too? Yeah, I'm sorry about the buffering. I apologize for that. It has nothing to do with me. Anyway, you should check out Nox Mente, Jerry's show that he does. I think it's not once a week. How often do you do that show, Jerry? Sally says, yeah, I'm cutting out. I apologize. Sally says at the time, quite quickly, the buzz was that he killed himself in the method you mentioned before, the sexual thing. Yeah, I don't know. I think something's going on there with the Hutchins piece. You know, the good thing about all of this cutting out and buffering, if there is a good thing, is that tomorrow when it's just streaming, it'll be fine. It'll all be one continuous piece. Oh, yeah, Kevin Gilbert. I know Kevin. Yeah, Kevin Gilbert. Interesting guy, Kevin Gilbert. He was in a band called Toy Matinee. And Kevin Gilbert, well, this is a trip, right? Because Kevin Gilbert was, what's her name? Singer. Oh my God, I'm having a moment here. Voces Nocte. Search for Nox Mente, the show name. Anyway, Kevin Gilbert was with, Lance Armstrong's ex-girlfriend. Famous singer. Come on, Robert. Turn it on. Anyway, Kevin Gilbert was connecting with her. Wow, what's her name? Hold on. Let me just see. Hugely talented guy, Toy Matinee. Toy Matinee is amazing. Toy Matinee is incredible. I used to play last playing out on my Sheryl Crow. Thank you, Jan. Thank you. So so here's the skinny on Kevin Gilbert. All right. For a while, I was dating a woman in San Francisco, Barbara, she's passed away. God bless her. She was an amazing person, an amazing harp player. She used to go to these, I think they were called the Tuesday night supper clubs. Thank you, Pins Magoo. She used to go to these Tuesday night supper clubs. And what they were, these musicians that would get together and play in LA. And Kevin Gilbert was there, and Sheryl Crow was there. That's where she got her start and cut her teeth in LA. And her and Kevin Gilbert were boyfriend and girlfriend. And the word on the street is that Kevin Gilbert was responsible for writing most of the material for Sheryl Crow's first record. They were together. There was a lot of collaboration going on. And what I find interesting is that first record was so strong. You know, it had all those hits. And then she's had some decent records after, but it was really that first record that put her on the map. And Kevin Gilbert, very talented guy. You find that Toy Matinee record. It's brilliant. He did that auto asphyxiation thing. Theoretically, right? I mean, theoretically. And I'm not saying that there was any foul play involved. And sometimes, you know, a noose is a noose. But we had Carradine, we had Michael Hutchins, and we had Kevin Gilbert, all right around the same time. I think Kevin Gilbert died around, 97, 98, if I'm not mistaken. And don't forget Leaving Las Vegas soundtrack. Help Jess, yeah, that's true. But it was that I think it's the Tuesday night or Thursday night supper club that she was a part of, where she met all these musicians. And Kevin Gilbert was one of them. And that's where they became boyfriend, girlfriend. And if you listen to the material on Toy Matinee, it is incredibly strong lyrically. This guy was super, super talented. The Carradine, the weird thing I heard about Carradine, there's Tuesday Night Music Club. That's it. It's the Tuesday Night Music Club. And it was Gilbert and Sheryl Crow. Yeah, Tuesday Night Music Club. Not the supper club. Tuesday Night, thank you. The thing about Carradine is like he was supposed to blow the lid on the New World Order or the Illuminati, or I don't know what to think of the Carradine thing. But what was really interesting was that his brother, Keith, got really involved in trying to understand what happened to his brother. And then he just backed off. You know, he backed off, and I don't know why he backed off, but I can only assume there were Gilbert died in 96. Okay, so that's 1 year before Michael Hutchence in 97. And I think Carradine was what? A couple of years after that. Wasn't Carradine around 2000 or something? He was in the Kill Bill movie. Both of them, right? But I think it was shortly after that when he. I think it was the 2000s when Carradine passes away. 2009. Okay, so we have 2009. So we have Gilbert and Hutchence 96, 97, and Carradine 2009. Strange stuff. Yeah, very, very curious. All right, well, listen, I'm going to put you out of your misery tonight having to deal with this bad stream. I apologize. It's usually pretty good. But if you want to look up more about Michael Hutchence's death, you know what I'm going to do? I'll probably put these on the website tomorrow. I'll just put them up there, and I'll have the stream up there, and you can check out the charts and look at them and get a sense and a feel for them, because they're interesting, especially the chart that is the chart of his death in conjunction with his natal chart and the Geldorf chart. The Geldorf chart is fascinating with that Mars-Pluto conjunction in the 8th house. All right, I'm going to get on out of here. You kind people, you're too good to stay up this late with me on a Saturday night. Fox smolder eventually. Oh, yeah, right, exactly. That's right, absolutely. So you're too kind to hang out with me this late on a Sunday night. I'll be back tomorrow with 15 minutes of flame, and next weekend I'll beef up the stream. Maybe I'll do something like going directly into the wall. We'll see if that helps. All right, use your head to discern what's real, your heart to what's possible. Thanks, Jerry. Thanks, everybody else. Have a great night. Have a great week. All-star crew in the chat room tonight. I'll see you guys tomorrow morning.